present the Voice of Mental Health Award, it is a great honor to introduce a dear friend to the JED Foundation, Dr. Andrew Soloman.
So I would like to say that unlike most of the people on this platform, I actually would have benefited from that strong backlighting we had a minute ago, flying to the face. Here I am. I'll begin, before I introduce the honoree, by just commenting that Bill and Donna Saytown are among the people I most admire in the world, and to say that I think there can never be enough tribute paid to the JED Foundation, which is the reification of hope built on the ashes of despair. I remember asking Donna soon after JED had died and the foundation had been formed why she had chosen to do this. And Donna said, JED took his life because he thought it had no meaning, and we want to be sure that his death is not also thought of as having no meaning. And I thought how Shah Jahan had built the Taj Mahal to commemorate his loss. And I thought that work was no more beautiful than the work that Bill and Donna have done with this foundation. But I'm here tonight to introduce Scott Stassel. Scott is the editor of The Atlantic magazine, former executive editor of the American Prospect, and sits on the board of incorporators of Harvard Magazine. His articles and essays have appeared in The Atlantic, The New Yorker, The New Republic, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, and many other publications. And his work has been repeatedly anthologized. He's lectured pretty much everywhere, recently at Harvard, MIT, UCLA, UC Berkeley, Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, and he's appeared on various national television shows, from Charlie Rose to CBS Sunday Morning to the Colbert Report to the O'Reilly Factor. The Boston Globe said of his first book, Sarge, The Life and Times of Sergeant Schreiber, Scott Stassel's superb new biography is an extraordinary achievement, and that book was the basis for the PBS documentary American Idealist. But his most recent book is the real occasion for his being honored here this evening. And it's called My Age of Anxiety, Fear, Hope, Dread, and the Search for Peace of Mind. It's been a New York Times bestseller. It's being published in more than 20 countries around the world, and has received rave reviews in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and just about everywhere else. I first read the book in galleys when it was sent to me for a blurb, and I was enormously impressed. And I gave a blurb which said, Scott Stassel has produced the definitive account of anxiety, weaving together science, history, and autobiography. His writing is evocative and often witty, disarmingly intimate, and wonderfully empathetic. This story has needed to be told, and Stassel tells it with edgy frankness, and I stand by every one of those words. Anxiety is a dread condition. I received an award from the JED Foundation some years ago related to my own work about depression, and I spoke then about depression and how it brings on a sense of nullity, of void, of loss of vitality, while anxiety makes you feel like you're going to explode. It's the problem of being terrified all the time and not knowing what you're terrified of. Depression and anxiety often go hand in hand, and sometimes it's hard to know where one leaves off and the other begins. The JED Foundation looks at the problem of suicide, and I think suicide is often triggered not by depression, but by the anxiety that is its frequent corollary. If you told me that I had to be depressed for the next month, I'd say I could bear it for a month, knowing that that was as long as it was going to last. because in many ways the darkest aspect of depression is its delusory air of permanence. But if you told me that I had to be acutely anxious for the next month, I would be tempted to run out of the Javits Center and throw myself in front of a truck on the West Side Highway, because every second of feeling that kind of acute anxiety is so punishing and so painful. As recently as 35 years ago, anxiety did not exist as a diagnostic category. Today, it is the most common form of officially classified mental illness. In elegant prose, in this amazing book, Scott Stassel presents an astonishing history of the efforts to understand the condition from medical, cultural, philosophical, and experiential perspectives, and paints a portrait of anxiety that reveals not only the anguish anxiety produces, but also the countless psychotherapies, medications, and other, sometimes outlandish treatments that are prescribed for it. He vividly depicts its human toll and the ways that those who suffer from it manage to control it. He describes in one especially striking scene his own anxiety on his wedding day, how he stood there shaking and sweating and worried that he was going to pass out from the anxiety that he was experiencing. I have not so far had the pleasure of meeting his wife, but I don't think that was the issue. He describes 1,000 other moments of anxiety. My anxiety can be intolerable. It often makes me miserable. But it is also maybe a gift, or at least the other side of a coin I ought to think twice about before trading in. Perhaps my anxiety is linked to whatever limited moral sense I can claim. What's more, the same anxious imagination that sometimes drives me mad with worry also enables me to plan effectively for unforeseen circumstances or unintended consequences that other, less vigilant temperaments might not. The quick social judging that is allied to my performance anxiety is also useful in helping me to size up situations quickly and to manage people and diffuse conflict. He goes on, in his 1941 essay, The Wound and the Bow, the literary critic Edmund Wilson writes of the Sophoclean hero Philoctetes, whose suppurated, never-healing snake-bite wound is linked to a gift for unerring accuracy with bow and arrow. His malodorous disease is inseparable from his superhuman art. In weakness and shamefulness is also the potential for transcendence, heroism, or redemption. My anxiety remains an unhealed wound that at times holds me back and fills me with shame, but it may also be, at the same time, a source of strength and a bestower of certain blessings. So Scott, I hope you are not feeling too anxious to enjoy this award, but I know that you'll come up and accept it, whether you're anxious or not. And so I offer it to you with great admiration. Thank you.
Well, I don't know if any of you have actually read my book, but for those of you who have, this is the first award that I've won in a kind of public setting like this since I was about 14 years old when I won a award for a tennis tournament. And in that situation, I was sitting there. I won the award for the under 14 tennis champion award. And as they went down through, starting with the 18s, the 16s, the 14s, I was filled with an unbearable sense of dread. And the thought of actually simply walking up on stage and receiving the award, and I didn't have to give a talk like I am now, was too unbearable for me. So when I got down to about the 16s, I scurried out and went to the basement and hid in the bathroom for about eight hours. You should be pleased that I'm actually here to accept it. I'm incredibly honored to receive this award, and I have to say I'm particularly honored to receive it from Andrew Soloman, whose book, The Noonday Demon, was not only of great interest, but of great solace for me when I was going through a sort of dark period not long after he published it, about a little over 10 years ago. And I have to confess that I explicitly modeled my book after his, and I believe there's a line in the proposal that I sent out to publishers that said, I propose to do for anxiety what Andrew Soloman did for depression, which was a challenging thing because he kind of had already done a little bit of for anxiety what I had planned to do. But I want to say a couple other things. One of the important things that I learned from Andrew's book, and also from Elizabeth Wurtzel's book, who has come with me tonight to this awards, is that there's actually value and not just shame in disclosing emotional struggles and mental illness. And in fact, not only is there not shame, but there's a way of connecting with people. And I have to say that when I published my book, it came out in January, I knew there would be some of this response, but I was astonished by not only the scope, but the intensity of the response, by the number of people who wrote to me to sort of say, just thank you for writing this book. And I've written this book. This is not a self-help book, at least officially. I'm not cured. I'm still, dealing with the anxiety disorders. But many people wrote to me to say that in some ineffable way, my writing about my own struggles with anxiety and anxiety disorder and mental illness had given them solace or consolation in some important way. I should say that some other people wrote to me to say that it actually gave them panic attacks and caused them to regress and suffer from mental illnesses that they thought they'd since recovered. So maybe my book should come with an FDA warning and maybe like a Xanax. But I do reckon what the effect of publishing this book made me realize was I realized to a much greater extent than I did before the value and the urgency of kind of lifting the shame and the stigma of mental illness. I mean, speaking for myself, I had great, and I talk about this in the book, I had great sort of ambivalence about, I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder when I was 10. I hid it for about 30-some years, and only in effect came out with anxiety when I published this book. And that has been in some ways liberating for me. My anxiety is actually lower as a result of that. But I've actually sort of been happily recruited to the cause of lifting the shame and stigma of anxiety and mental illness more generally, because I feel like it allows the sorts of conversations and supported by the Jet Foundation. And I just, in closing, I just want to say that the work of the Jet Foundation is so important. And to speak just of anxiety disorders, which is the affliction that I can speak with most authority to, they are real. They come with acute debility, misery, and they sort of impair your life. But they can be managed and treated, and there are many people who do not realize that. And I realize that, and I've learned since I published the book, the number of people who have written to me who said, "I didn't know what I was suffering from. It's like you're talking with my own mind. I feel much more comfortable talking about this." So the extent to which people of all ages, but particularly people in college and high school who are suffering from anxiety and depression and who feel comfortable coming out with it and seeking professional help, talking to their friends, the Jet Foundation can literally save lives. And I've never, the awards I won when I scurried down to the basement to avoid actually accepting the award and appearing in front of a far smaller group of people than I'm now appearing in front of now. The significance of this award is much greater because the Jet Foundation is actually saving lives, or has the potential to save lives, and many, many lives, by the message that is spreading. So I'm incredibly honored to receive this award. I'm particularly honored to receive it from Andrew Soloman, and thank you to the Jet Foundation, to Andrew and Joel.